There is no denying that the Galaxy Note 10 Plus is probably one of the sleekest, smartest, sexiest looking smartphones out there right now, especially when you compare it to something like the iPhone 10. It's got damn looks that a mother can only love with this weird triple array notch. I mean, what were they thinking? I have to give them kudos points on the matte frosted glass, but other than that, I'm not an Apple hater, but just not a fan of the design, especially moving to their 3-year update schedule for a complete redesign. Whereas the Note 10 Plus on the other hand, you look at that display, you just look at it. Forget 90Hz, forget 120Hz, just look at that display and I'm sure it will be having you feeling a bit mesmerized. Something about its boxy, rigid dimensions, it's angular, it's large, it's probably one of the largest screens out right now. I would have probably loved to say it's the largest, but I'm pretty sure there's a phone that's tried to beat it by a tiny smidge. I just can't remember what phone it is right now. Maybe by the time I edit it, I'll put it up here. This phone is awesome in so many ways, and I really got to take a deep dive and really show you everything and show you why this phone is so great, what makes it awesome, and why you might want to consider it. You know what, scratch all that all sounds a bit too gassed. If you don't know what gassed is, it means a bit overhyped. Really and truly, let's get into what really matters. Is this a phone that you want to upgrade, or is it something that you want to skip? Don't look at me, I'm buying some tech because I like to review it and make videos about it, but there's other normal consumers that might be considering it or sticking with their current phone as it is. So I'm really going to break it down into what really matters. I'm going to try and come up with everything that matters in what I call the trial by triage. So at the top we have design and display, very important in every smartphone, the double Ds. Absolute must. Then we will have the camera quality and the video quality, because it's absolutely essential nowadays that smartphones offer you very good camera and video quality. The best camera is the one that you always have with you. Finally, after the display, the design, the camera, then it's the battery life and how much use you can get out of this phone. Those three things are the three corners that make a great smartphone. Then we have everything in the middle, the software, the gimmicks, the features, everything else that really adds to the experience. But those three things done right is basically the foundations of an awesome phone. So let's start with the first thing, that display. Now Apple told us many years ago that 330 ppi pixels per inch was probably more than enough for the human eye, because the human eye can't distinguish anything further. But everyone ignored Apple, and I'm glad they did, because higher resolutions, higher PPIs really come into its own when you're zooming in, cropping in into other high resolution images, sample images, photos from other DSLRs or whatever, what have you. These displays go a long way. Now if you're not doing any of that for day-to-day use, 1080p is more than adequate, and it's what most people run these phones on out of the box, because unless you change the resolution manually, by default it runs 1080p. So 6.8 inch 60Hz panel, AMOLED, one of the most nicest looking smartphone screens that you could get your hands on right now. And don't believe my word for it, listen to every other million Note 10 reviews and you'll hear the same. 60Hz or 90Hz, 180Hz, doesn't really matter. But it's this display that you're talking about. This is beyond what the competition and the rest of the market has to offer at this stage. The design. So you have the hole punch camera cutout, which can be annoying in some situations, but for the most part, after using it for a month, it doesn't bother me one bit. The only time it actually bothers me is when you're watching things like Netflix, and its stupid thing likes to not give you the full screen even if you crop in. I'll show you what I mean. See that part of the display, let me turn the audio down. This part of the display where the hole punch is hasn't been optimized for all apps and doesn't let you see everything. Now this is only on some video apps, it's fine on YouTube, it's fine on Prime Video, Netflix is an issue, but there might be others. But I'm sure that's something some software updates will sort out in the coming few weeks and months. Now I've gone for the Aura Black Edition, just because I like my things simple, don't really like that glitzy rainbow effect, especially when it's going to be in a case anyways, because I was one of the first people to break a Note 10 Plus. I managed to smash mine on the floor within 4 days, the first phone screen I ever smashed. Luckily I had insurance, but it is slippery as hell, especially once you've handled it some and you just do this or that, it will go flying, and I'm not going to demonstrate because I can't afford to get another one. There's not really much else to the design other than the bezels aren't uniform, the bottom chin is ever so slightly bigger than the top chin, there's no headphone jack, it's a glass sandwich, which is a bit of a necessary design to incorporate things like NFC and wireless charging. But the overall boxy, squared off design really suits me, really like the look of it, can't wait to see what Samsung will give us next with the Galaxy One or Galaxy X, whatever it is that's coming out next year. Next thing we're going to really go into is the battery life. Now 4300 milliamps, maybe if there wasn't an S Pen it'd be 4500 milliamps. The phone is thinner than the previous Notes, especially the Note 9, and if they made it thicker, you know, they could have given us a lot larger battery, but they decided not to. 4300 milliamps, I'm getting 6.5 to 7 hours of screen on time, heavy use in the performance mode enabled, which doesn't limit the CPU speed at any given stage. So the battery life is great, nothing to complain on that front, especially when you get something like this with the plethora of features that it actually has. I was tempted to record this on the Note 10, but let me just switch. Now this is a very similar shot, but now being recorded through the Note 10 Plus. It's a bit disorientating to stare into a tiny lens, and I'm very tempted to stare right in the center. I'm recording through an external headset. I do have some extra lighting, just as I would with my normal camera. But regardless of how great mobile phone camera quality gets, there's no replacing your big ass camera just yet. I mean, sure, this looks good, and if this was the only camera I had available to me, this looks very good and people can build massive channel bases, do loads of filming on something as small as this. But I've got more to show you. The rock steady stabilization that comes out with this phone, look at this footage, absolutely creamy, absolutely awesome. I've used my GH5 to film the phone first, and that's got proper mechanical movement on the sensor, and it's a big ass camera, and it looks like the Note 10's footage is a lot more stabilized, probably because it's easier to hold, doesn't weigh roughly 2 kilos and front heavy because of the lens and things like this, but nevertheless it's very impressive. And you know, as long as you're happy to use this, in most cases you don't even need to use an action camera if you've got this, but it might look a bit stupid mounted to your head if you're riding a bike or something. So yeah, you might still want to get an action camera for those sort of cases. There's a load of video effects and filters and all this nonsense built in. If I'm honest, it looks rubbish. Like, no matter what people tell you, I don't get these phones for free. I'll tell you honestly, it's just rubbish. It looks fake. It's good for fun, but there's millions of apps that can let you have fun without it being a headline feature on a smartphone release. This is the super crazy bokeh mode, which looks absolutely ridiculous. There's a bit of exertion going on here, and you won't get that hyper steady mode either that you're afforded by the rear cameras. But nevertheless, this is still a lot of progress when it comes to mobile video recording. Glitch effect, as you can see, it's all bugging out, it's all going wrong, it's all glitching up. Not really a fan, but maybe it'll be useful for some people in certain scenarios. This black and white mode, to be honest, doesn't look that bad. It's able to isolate me as the subject and keep the whole background in a completely different color. Other features and gimmicks which makes the inside of my triangle of triage. It's got the brand new Exynos 9825 Samsung processor in Europe and Korea and Asian markets, I believe, but America's got the Snapdragon variant. Now this is what the difference is. I'm just showing you now. So you can see the Snapdragon processor is overall better in graphics and processing compute power, but it's not a massive difference, it's not a major difference, and it's nothing to really feel like you're a winner or loser over. Just get the phone that's native to your country, get the warranty easier from your local Samsung retailer in that country. Don't bother trying to get one or the other, just get the one that the country you live in offers. One thing I found really impressive was the 10-watt reverse wireless charging capability on this phone. I mean, you don't have that much battery to share. Battery's not really something you always want to share, but things like your wireless AirPods or Galaxy Buds, or even if your mate's phone is on like 10% and you've got 80%, you could afford to give away like 30% of your battery and it will charge it at 10 watts if it's a Android newer phone. The S Pen is great. I'm not even going to go into it because I use it less and less. It's more of a gimmick now to me. I mean, some people might be able to benefit from it, but for me, the S Pen, well, I don't really care anymore. It was great when it first came out, then they stripped the Notes app, it had lost a lot of functionality, then they bring it back, and you know what, screw you, Samsung. Screw you. Why make something worse when it was already better in the past in the Note 4? The Note 4 had the best S Pen functionality. They don't have any of the wireless gestures or camera snap or things like that, but the S Pen apps, and they really degraded them over the years to try and make them better again now. Now the button placements can be a bit subjective to people, but all on one side is great. I just wish they added like a shutter button. I mean, they had 3 buttons in the previous gen phones. Why not add a shutter button? I mean, you've got a stupidly sized phone, like it's like tall as my hand or just smaller. Why not just add a shutter button? I don't understand. How much easier would it be to do that instead of do that? Another great thing about the phone, haptic feedback engine, which is basically the vibration motor. Can't explain to you in tangible words why this is such a big deal, but essentially it just feels ever so more precise than ever before. It feels a lot more punchy, as if it was tight, punchy base. Now, some flaws. The fingerprint scanner. Now, it is a bit hit and miss. Sometimes it's super instant, and sometimes it just takes that half a second longer, 1/3 of a second longer. That just doesn't give you that snappy response that you're looking for, especially when you've been used to mechanical fingerprint sensors, which when as soon as you touch, it unlocks, touch, unlock, touch, unlocks. Now it's more like touch, unlock, touch, unlock. And I know some other phones have better optics. Hopefully Samsung will either improve the firmware on this ultrasonic version or adopt the optical version like the one in the OnePlus 7 Pro. You can't do a review about the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus without mentioning the stupid decision of removing the headphone jack. Why be a copycat when you slated Apple for so many years with their weird notch adverts? I don't know if you've seen them, I'll add a link. You had a whole media campaign cussing Apple, cussing their notch, cussing them omitting the headphone, and now you go and do it. I hate you for that.
Why, Samsung? Why?
Now the speaker sounds definitely better than the Note 8, but not as good as the Note 9 or the S10. Somehow it sounds a bit muffled, the whole thing vibrates, it's a bit weird. This was always gonna be a long review. To summarize, is this phone any good? Is it really worth it? In a word, yes, yes it is. The optics are absolutely great, the screen is absolutely awesome. The battery life is phenomenal. I mean, I know I showed you these screen grabs of 6 hours and 45 minutes at 25%. Who's to say that can't go to 8 hours or at least 7.5 hours? Not many phones can really top trump Samsung here when it comes to that regard. In terms of immersion factor with this display, there's no other display out there that has colors and accuracy like this one does. Then we get to the camera again. You can record HDR video, color grade it yourself from the flat profile when you put it onto a PC. You've got 3 lenses to choose from. The ×2 has a bit of color shift, but nothing hopefully that Samsung can't sort out with a bit of software tuning. The omission of the headphone jack is always going to be a sore point, but at the end of the day, if it's where the market is going, who are we to influence the market other than saying no? And if that's the case, we should all stop buying phones that don't have a headphone jack. So that is it for my review. I hope you guys found it useful. I hope you guys can take something away from this when it comes to deciding whether or not you really want a Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus. And that is it, and I will catch you guys in the next one.